All right. Welcome, mortals. It's been a while since I have done one of these. I automatically start with my cat on me now, apparently. As soon as I was about to start, he decided to jump on me. Anyway, this is Nate Reads the Classics. I am on part 3 of my reading of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. This is the first time I've read this. I am experimenting with screen sharing where I'm reading it from, since it is a book in the public domain. You are seeing the um, Gutenberg.org, I believe is what it's called, um, HTML upload. So this is not a PDF or anything. It's not copyrighted material. It is the original. Well, it's not any longer copyrighted anyway, I should say. But this is, as you can see now, now that I've added that to my repertoire of skills, knowing how to share a screen. Chapter 10. So the last two streams that I have done, I have gone um, basically, I think the first 5 chapters and then the next 4. So now I'm on chapter 10, The Man of the Seas. Um, my cat is probably a little distracting, but that's how he always is. My shirt is going to be very hairy after he leaves. He will probably leave in the next 5-10 minutes when he gets bored. But for now, I'm going to start doing my reading. This is, again, Nate Reads the Classics, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, from the public domain. Chapter 10, The Man of the Seas. It was the commander of the vessel who thus spoke. At these words Ned Land rose suddenly. The steward, nearly strangled, tottered out on a sign from his master. But such was the power of the commander on board, that not a gesture betrayed the resentment which this man must have felt towards the Canadian. Conseil, interested in spite of himself, I stupefied, awaited in silence the result of this scene. The commander, leaning against the corner of the table with his arms folded, scanned us with profound attention. Did he hesitate to speak? Did he regret the words which he had just spoken in French? One might also think so. After some moments of silence, which not one of us dreamed of breaking, "Gentlemen," said he, in a calm and penetrating voice, "I speak French, English, German, and Latin equally well. I could therefore have answered you all at your first interview. But I wished to know you first, then to reflect. The story told by each one, entirely agreeing in the main points, convinced me of your identity. I know now that chance has brought before me M. Pierre Aronnax, professor of natural history at the Museum of Paris, entrusted with a scientific mission abroad, Conseil, his servant, and Ned Land, of Canadian origin, harpooner on board the frigate Abraham Lincoln of the Navy of the United States of America." I bowed assent. It was not a question that the commander put to me, therefore there was no answer to be made. This man expressed himself with perfect ease, without any accent. His sentences were well tuned, his words clear, and his fluency of speech remarkable. Yet I did not recognize in him a fellow countryman. He continued the conversation in these terms: "You have doubtless thought, sir, that I have delayed long in paying you this second visit. The reason is that, your identity recognized, I wish to weigh maturely weigh maturely what part to act towards you. I have hesitated much. Most annoying circumstances have brought you into the presence of a man who has broken all the ties of humanity. You have come to trouble my existence." "Unintentionally," said I. "Unintentionally?" replied the stranger, raising his voice a little. "Was it unintentionally that the Abraham Lincoln pursued me all over the seas? Was it unintentionally that you took passage in this frigate? Was it unintentionally that your cannon balls rebounded off the plating of my vessel? Was it unintentionally that Mr. Ned Land struck me with his harpoon? I detected a restrained irritation in these words. Where was I? I detected a restrained irritation in these words, but to these recriminations I had a very natural answer to make, and I made it. Sir, said I, no doubt you are ignorant of the discussions which have taken place concerning you in America and Europe. You do not know the divers accidents, caused by collisions with your submarine machine, have excited public feeling in the two continents. I omit the theories without number by which I was sought to explain that of which you alone possess the secret. But you must understand that, in pursuing you over the high seas of the Pacific, the Abraham Lincoln believed itself to be chasing some powerful sea monster, of which it was necessary to rid the ocean at any price. Thought I heard something strange. A half smile curled the lips of the commander. Then, in a calmer tone, "Am Aronnax," he replied, "dare you affirm that your frigate would not as soon have pursued and cannonaded a submarine boat as a monster?" This question embarrassed me, for certainly Captain Farragut might not have hesitated. He might have thought it was his duty to destroy a contrivance of this kind, as he would a gigantic narwhal. "You underestimate, then, sir," continued the stranger, "that I have the right to treat you as enemies?" I answered nothing, purposely, for what good would it be to discuss such a proposition when force could destroy the best arguments? "I have hesitated some time," continued the commander. "Nothing obligated me to show you hospitality. If I chose to separate myself from you, I should have no interest in seeing you again. I could place you upon the deck of this vessel which has served you as a refuge. I could sink beneath the waters and forget you had ever existed. Would that not be my right?" "It might be the right of a savage," I answered, "but not that of a civilized man." "Professor," replied the commander, quickly, "I am not what you call a civilized man. I have done with society entirely, for reasons which I alone have the right of appreciating. I do not therefore obey its laws, and I desire you never to allude to them before me again." This was said plainly. A flash of anger and disdain kindled in the eyes of the unknown, and I had a glimpse of a terrible past in the life of this man. Not only had he put himself beyond the pale of human laws, but he had made himself independent of them, free in the strictest application of the word, acceptation of the word, quite beyond their reach. Who then would dare to pursue him at the bottom of the sea, when on its surface he defied all attempts made against him? What vessel could resist the shock of his submarine monitor? What cuirass, however thick, could withstand the blows of his spur? No man could demand from him an account of his actions. God, if he believed in one, his conscience, if he had one, were the sole judges to whom he was answerable. These reflections crossed my mind rapidly, whilst the stranger personage was silent, absorbed, and as if wrapped up in himself. I regarded him with fear mingled with interest, as, doubtless, Oedipus regarded the Sphinx. I would think that would be Oedipus, but it's spelled edifice. After rather a long silence, the commander resumed the conversation. "I have hesitated," said he, "but I have thought that my interest might be reconciled with that pity to which every human being has a right. You will remain on board my vessel, since fate has cast you there. You will be free, and, in exchange for this liberty, I shall only impose one single condition. Your word of honor to submit to it will suffice." "Speak, sir," I answered. "I suppose this condition is one which a man of honor may accept?" "Yes, sir, it is this. It is possible that certain events, unforeseen, may oblige me to consign you to your cabins for hours or some days, as the case may be. As I desire never to use violence, I expect from you, more than all the others, a passive obedience. In thus acting, I take all the responsibility. I acquit you entirely, for I make it an impossibility for you to see what ought not to be seen. Do you accept this condition?" Then things took place on board which, to say the least, were singular, and which ought not to be seen by people who were not placed beyond the pale of social laws. Amongst the surprises which the future was preparing for me, this might not be the least. We accept, I answered. Only I will ask your permission, sir, to address one question to you, one only. Speak, sir. You said that we should be free on board. Entirely. I ask you then, what do you mean by this liberty? Just the liberty to go, to come, to see, to observe, even all that passes here, save under rare circumstances, the liberty, in short, which we enjoy ourselves, my companions and I. It was evident that we did not understand one another. Pardon me, sir, I resumed, but this liberty is only what every prisoner has of pacing his prison. It cannot suffice us. It must suffice you, however. What? We must renounce ever seeing our country, our friends, our relations again? Yes, sir, but to renounce that unendurable worldly yoke which men believe to be liberty is not perhaps so painful as you think. Well, exclaimed Ned Land, never will I give my word of honor not to try to escape. I do not ask you for your word of honor, Master Land, answered the commander, coldly. Sir, I replied, beginning to get angry in spite of myself, you abuse your situation towards us. It is cruelty. No, sir, it is clemency. You are my prisoners of war. I keep you when I could by a word. I keep you when I could by a word plunge you into the depths of the ocean. You attacked me. You came to surprise a secret which no man in the world must penetrate, the secret of my whole existence, and you think that I am going to send you back to that world which must know me no more? Never. In retaining you, it is not you whom I guard, it is myself. These words indicated a resolution taken on the part of the commander, against which no arguments would prevail. So, sir, I rejoined, you give us simply the choice between life and death? Simply. My friends, said I, to a question thus put, there is nothing to answer, but no word of honor binds us to the master of this vessel. None, sir, answered the unknown. Then, in a gentler tone, he continued, now permit me to finish what I have to say to you. I know you, Aronnax. You and your companions will not, perhaps, have so much to complain of in the chance which has bound you to my fate. You will find amongst the books which are my favorite study the work which you have published on the depths of the sea. I have often read it. You have carried out your work as far as terrestrial science permitted you, but you do not know all. You have not seen all. Let me tell you then, Professor, that you will not regret the time passed on board my vessel. You are going to visit the land of marvels. These words of the commander had a great effect upon me, I cannot deny it. My weak point was touched, and I forgot for a moment that the contemplation of these sublime subjects was not worth the loss of liberty. Besides, I trusted to the future to decide this grave question, so I contented myself with saying, by what name ought I to address you? Sir, replied the commander, I am nothing to you but Captain Nemo. And you and your companions are nothing to me but the passengers of the Nautilus. Captain Nemo called. A steward appeared. The captain gave him his orders in that strange language which I did not understand. Then, turning towards the Canadian and Conseil, a repast awaits you in your cabin, said he. Be so good as to follow this man. And now, Aronnax, our breakfast is ready. Permit me to lead the way. I am at your service, Captain. I followed Captain Nemo, and as soon as I had passed through the door, I found myself in a kind of passage, lighted by electricity, similar to the waist of a ship. After we had proceeded a dozen yards, a second door opened before me. I then entered a dining room, decorated and furnished in severe taste. High oaken sideboards, inlaid with ebony, stood at the two extremities of the room, and upon their shelves glittered china, porcelain, and glass of inestimable value. The plate on the table sparkled in the trays which the luminous ceiling shed around, while the light was tempered and softened by exquisite paintings. In the center of the room was a table richly laid out. Captain Nemo indicated the place I was to occupy. The breakfast consisted of a certain number of dishes, the contents of which were furnished by the sea alone, and I was ignorant of the nature and mode of preparation of some of them. I acknowledged that they were good, but they had a peculiar flavor, which I easily became accustomed to. These different aliments appeared to me to be rich in phosphorus. Aliments? Sorry. Different aliments appeared to me to be rich in phosphorus, and I thought they must have a marine origin. Captain Nemo looked at me. I asked him no questions, but he guessed my thoughts and answered of his own accord the questions which I was burning to address to him. The greater part of these dishes are unknown to you, he said to me. However, you may partake of them without fear. They are wholesome and nourishing. For a long time I have renounced food of the earth, and I am never ill now. My crew, who are healthy, are fed on the same food. So, said I, all these eatables are the produce of the sea? Yes, Professor. The sea supplies all my wants. Sometimes I cast my nets in tow, and I draw them in ready to break. Sometimes I hunt in the midst of this element, which appears to be inaccessible to man, and quarry the game which dwells in my submarine forests. My flocks, like those of Neptune's old shepherds, graze fearlessly in the immense prairies of the ocean. I have a vast property there, which I cultivate myself, and which is always sworn by the hand of the Creator of all things. I can understand perfectly, sir, that your nets furnish excellent fish for your table. I can understand also that you hunt aquatic game in your submarine forests, but I cannot understand at all how a particle of meat, no matter how small, can figure in your bill of fare. This, which you believe to be meat, Professor, is nothing else than fillet of turtle. Here are also some dolphin's livers, which you take to be ragout. I don't know, it's French, of pork. My cook is a clever fellow who excels in dressing these various products of the ocean. Taste all these dishes. Here is a preserve of sea cucumber, which a Malay would declare to be unrivaled in the world. Here is a cream, of which the milk has been furnished by the cetacea, and the sugar by the great fucus of the North Sea. And lastly, permit me to offer you some preserve of anemones, which is equal to that of the most delicious fruits. I tasted, more from curiosity than as a connoisseur, whilst Captain Nemo enchanted me with his extraordinary stories. You like the sea, Captain? Yes, I love it. The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is an immense desert, where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides. The sea is only the embodiment of the supernatural and wonderful existence. Existence, yes. It is nothing but love and emotion. It is the living infinite, as one of your poets has said. In fact, Professor, nature manifests herself in it by her three kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, and animal. The sea is the vast reservoir of nature. The globe began with sea, so to speak, and who knows if it will not end with it? In it is supreme tranquillity. The sea does not belong to despots. Upon the surface men can still exercise just laws, fight, tear one another to pieces, and be carried away with terrestrial horrors. But at 30 feet below its level, their reign ceases, their influence is quenched, and their power disappears. Ah, sir, live, live in the bosom of the waters. There only is independence. There I recognize no masters. There I am free. Pause a moment. Captain Nemo suddenly became silent in the midst of this enthusiasm, by which he was quite carried away. For a few moments he paced up and down, much agitated. Then he became more calm, regained his accustomed coldness of expression, and turning towards me, "Now, Professor," said he, "if you wish to go over the Nautilus, I am at your service." Captain Nemo rose. I followed him. A double door, contrived at the back of the dining room, opened, and I entered a room equal in dimensions to that which I had just quitted. Excuse me. It was a library, high pieces of furniture, of black violet ebony inlaid with brass. Supported upon their wide shelves, a great number of books uniformly bound. They followed the shape of the room, terminating at the lower part of huge divans. I'm going to say it's divans, covered with brown leather, which were curved to afford the greatest comfort. Light, movable desks, made to slide in and out at will, allowed one to rest one's book while reading. In the center stood an immense table, covered with pamphlets, amongst which were some newspapers, already of old date. The electric light flooded everything. It was shed from four unpolished globes, half sunk in the volutes of the ceiling. I looked with real admiration at this room, so ingeniously fitted up, and I could scarcely believe my eyes. Captain Nemo, said I to my host, who had just thrown himself on one of the divans, this is a library which would do honor to more than one of the continental palaces, and I am absolutely astonished when I consider that it can follow you to the bottom of the seas. Where could one greater find solitude or silence, Professor? Replied Captain Nemo. Did your study in the museum afford you such perfect quiet? No, sir, and I must confess that it is a very poor one after yours. You must have 6 or 7 thousand volumes here. 12,000, Amerinax. These are the only ties which bind me to the earth, but I had done with the world on the day when my Nautilus plunged for the first time beneath the waters. That day I brought my last volumes, my last pamphlets, my last papers, and from that time I wish to think that man no longer think or write. These books, Professor, are at your service besides, and you can make use of them freely. I thanked Captain Nemo and went up to the shelves of the library. Works on science, morals, and literature abound in every language, but I did not see one single work of political economy. That subject appeared to be strictly prescribed. Strange to say, all these books were irregularly arranged, in whatever language they were written, and this melody proved that the captain of the Nautilus must have read indiscriminately the books which he took up by chance. Sir, said I to the captain, I thank you for having placed this library at my disposal. It contains treasures of science, and I shall profit by them. This room is not only a library, said Captain Nemo, it is also a smoking room. A smoking room, I cried. Then one may smoke on board? Certainly. Then, sir, I am forced to believe that you have kept up a communication with Havana. Not any, answered the captain, except this cigar, Amerinax, and, though it does not come from Havana, you will be pleased with it if you are a connoisseur. I took the cigar which was offered me. Its shape recalled the London ones, but it seemed to be made of leaves of gold. I lighted it at a little brazier, which was supported upon an elegant bronze stem, and drew the first whiffs with the delight of a lover of smoking who has not smoked for 2 days. It is excellent, but it is not tobacco. No, answered the captain. This tobacco comes neither from Havana nor from the East. It is a kind of seaweed rich in nicotine, with which the sea, provides me, but somewhat sparingly. At that moment, Captain Nemo opened a door which stood opposite to that by which I had entered the library, and I passed into an immense drawing room, splendidly lighted. It was a vast, four-sided room, 30 feet long, 18 wide, and 15 high. A luminous ceiling, decorated with light arabesques, shed a soft, clear light over all the marvels accumulated in this museum. For it was in fact a museum, in which an intelligent and prodigal hand had gathered all the treasures of nature and art, with the artistic confusion which distinguishes a painter's studio. 30 first-rate pictures, uniformly framed, separated by bright drapery, ornamented the walls, which were hung with tapestry of severe design. I saw works of great value, the greater part of which I had admired in the special collections of Europe and in the exhibitions of paintings. The several schools of the old masters were represented by a Madonna of Raphael, a Virgin of Leonardo da Vinci, a nymph of Correggio, a woman of Titan, an adoration of Veronese, an Assumption of Murillo, a portrait of Holbein, a monk of Velasquez, a martyr of Ribera, a fair of Rubens, two Flemish landscapes of Teniers, three little genre pictures of Gerard Dow, Metsu, and Paul Potter, two specimens of Gericault and Proudhon. It's a lot of names I don't know. And some sea pieces of Buckhausen, and Vernet. Amongst the works of modern painters were pictures with the signatures of Delacroix, Ingres, Decamps, Troyon, Meissonier, Daubigny, etc., and some admirable statues in marble and bronze, after the finest antique models, stood upon pedestals in the corners of this magnificent museum. Amazement, as the captain of the Nautilus had predicted, had already begun to take possession of me. "Professor," said the strange man, "you must excuse the unceremonious way in which I receive you, and the disorder of this room." "Sir," I answered, "without seeking to know who you are, I recognize you as an artist. I recognize in you an artist." "An amateur, nothing more, sir. Formerly I loved to collect these beautiful works created by the hand of man. I sought them greedily and ferreted them out indefatigably, and I have been able to bring together some objects of great value. These are my last souvenirs of that world which is dead to me. In my eyes, your modern artists are already old. They have 2 or 3 thousand years of experience. I confound them in my own mind. Masters have no age." "And these musicians?" said I, pointing out some works of Weber, Rossini, Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Meyerbeer, Harold, Wagner, Auber, Gounod, and a number of others, scattered over a large model piano organ which occupied one of the panels of the drawing room. Excuse me. "These musicians," replied Captain Nemo, "are the contemporaries of Orpheus, for in the memory of the dead all chronological differences are effaced. And I am dead, Professor, as much dead as those of your friends who are sleeping 6 feet under the earth." Captain Nemo was silent, and seemed lost in a profound reverie. I contemplated him with deep interest, analyzing in silence the strange expression of his countenance. Leaning on his elbow against an angle of a costly mosaic table, he no longer saw me, he had forgotten my presence. I did not disturb this reverie, and continued my observation in the curiosities which enriched this drawing room. Under elegant glass cases, fixed by copper rivets, were classed and labelled the most precious productions of the sea which had ever been presented to the eye of the naturalist. My delight as a professor may be conceived. The division containing the zoophytes presented the most curious specimens of the two groups of polypi and echinoderms. In the first group, the tubipores were gorgonis, arranged like a fan, soft sponges of Syria, ices of the Moluccas, panaculates, and admirable virgularia of the Norwegian seas, variegated umbellulae. I'm gonna do my best here. Bear with me. Alcyonariae, a whole series of madrepores, which my master Milne Edwards has so cleverly classified, amongst which I remark some wonderful flabellinae, oculinae of the island of Bourbon, the Neptune's car of the Antilles, superb varieties of corals, in short, every species of those curious polypi of which entire islands are formed, and which one day become continents, of the echinoderms, remarkable for their coating of spines, asteri, sea stars, pantocrinae, comatules, asterophans, echini, holothri, etc., represented individually a complete collection of this group. A somewhat nervous conchiliologist would certainly have fainted before more numerous cases in which were classified the specimens of mollusks. It was a collection of inestimable value, which time fails me to describe minutely. Amongst these specimens I will quote from memory only the elegant royal hammerfish of the Indian Ocean, whose rectangular white spots stood out brilliantly in a red and brown ground, an imperial spondyle, bright-colored, bristling with spines, a rare specimen in the European museums. I estimated its value at no less than L1000. A common hammerfish of the seas of New Holland, which is only procured with difficulty, exotic Bucardia of Senegal, fragile white bivalve shells, with which a breath might shatter like a soap bubble. Several varieties of the aspergillum of Java, a kind of calcareous tube, edged with leafy folds, and much debated by amateurs. A whole series of trochee, some a greenish yellow, found in the American seas, others a reddish brown, natives of Australian waters, others from the Gulf of Mexico, remarkable for their imbricated shell, stellari found in the southern seas, and last, the rarest of all, the magnificent spur of New Zealand, and every description of delicate and fragile shells to which science has given appropriate names. Apart in separate compartments were spread the chaplets of pearls of the greatest beauty, which reflected the electric light in little sparks of fire, pink pearls torn from the pinna marina of the Red Sea, green pearls of the haliotide iris, yellow, blue, and black pearls, the curious productions of the divers mollusks of every ocean, and certain mussels of the watercourse of the north, lastly several specimens of inestimable value, which had been gathered from the rarest pintadines. Some of these pearls were larger than a pigeon's egg, and were smooth as much, and more, than that which the traveller Tavernier sold to the Shah of Persia for 3 millions, and surpassed the one in the possession of the Imam of Muscat, which I had believed to be unrivaled in the world. Therefore, to estimate the value of this collection was simply impossible. Captain Nemo must have expanded millions in the acquirement of these various specimens, and I was thinking what source he could have drawn from, to have been able thus to gratify his fancy for collecting, when I was interrupted by these words. "You are examining my shells, Professor. Questionably they must be interesting to a naturalist, but for me they have a far greater charm, for I have collected them all with my own hand, and there is not a sea on the face of the globe which has escaped my researches. I can understand, Captain, the delight of wandering about in the midst of such riches. You are one of those who have collected their treasures themselves. No museum of Europe possesses such a collection of the produce of the ocean, but if I exhaust all my admiration upon it, I shall have none left for the vessel which carries it. I do not wish to pry into your secrets, but I must confess that this Nautilus, which, with the motive power which is confined in it, the contrivances which enable it to be worked, the powerful agent which propels it, all excite my curiosity to the highest pitch. I see suspended in the walls of the room instruments of whose use I am ignorant. You will find these same instruments in my own room, Professor, where I shall have much pleasure in explaining their use to you. But first come and inspect the cabin, which is set apart for your own use. You must see how you'll be accommodated on board the Nautilus." I followed Captain Nemo, who, by one of the doors opening from each panel of the drawing-room, regained the waist. He conducted me towards the bow, and there I found, not a cabin, but an elegant room, with a bed, dressing-table, and several other pieces of excellent furniture. I could only thank my host. "Your room adjoins mine," said he, opening a door, and mine opens into the drawing room that we have just quitted. I entered the captain's room. It had a severe, almost monkish aspect. A small iron bedstead, a table, some articles for the toilet, the whole lighted by a skylight. No comforts, the strictest necessities only. Captain Nemo pointed to a seat. Be so good as to sit down, he said. I seated myself, and he began thus. End of chapter. Wow, that was a long chapter. And to think he split it where he did, and didn't split it, before describing a million seashells. Yeah, that was a long one. Um, yeah, if you're watching this either live right now, or if you're watching this as a video on demand later on, thank you for watching. This is Nate Reads the Classics, where I read from the public domain stories that are of interest to me, and stories, if a request comes in for some piece of classic literature, something that was published more than 100 years ago, I will read it here on this channel if I take the time to. If there's enough demand, certainly I will. Both because I enjoy classic literature. I was an English major in college, and I know how annoying it can be to try to read through every little thing yourself, and sometimes you'd rather just listen to someone else read it. And if you're a college kid, you're probably too poor to afford Audible, or if you do, maybe some of these things aren't on Audible. I don't know. Or maybe you don't want to use your credits on it. Whatever your reason is, that's what Nate Reads the Classics is all about. It also serves a second purpose, because I am a fantasy author. This is my book, Withered Kingdom. I am sharing it through my blog and through my Twitch streaming and the video on demand, which also ends up on my YouTube channel. I share to all my social media outlets because I'm trying to sell my book in the best ways I know how, and most of those are free, like taking some time to not only enjoy reading classic literature, but also to talk about my book between chapters. This book here, Withered Kingdom, is a novel about an angel who has lost all of his memories, all the memories of his past life, and finds himself on a planet stuck in a very medieval type of technological progress, and one caught up in a magical war that spans across an entire continent and more. So, being brought into this world, the main character, Gia, makes friends with a half giant, and this half giant helps teach him about how to get along in this life, and also happens to help him connect with some people relevant to his former life. And those connections help him to understand how to survive and make it to the other side of a world torn apart by war. So that's Withered Kingdom here. This is my fantasy novel again. It was published through Kindle Direct Publishing, which is a self-publishing platform made by Amazon. And it is available now as a softcover, Kindle ebook, and now as a hardcover. I hopefully in the next couple days will get the first hardcover proofs, or the first hardcover printed copies. I never even ordered proofs. I just wanted to get the hardcover done so badly. I didn't really wait for a proof, and it takes long enough for them to print and bind and send them. Um, and they charge extra, even if you're an Amazon Prime member, they charge you extra for shipping. But that being said, everything about Kindle Direct Publishing makes a lot more sense than any of the other self-publishing platforms that I have encountered. I went with a different one when I published a book back in 2009. I didn't like how it turned out, and some people might. That's fine. I'm not going to badmouth them here. That's not my duty. But I went with Amazon. I use a lot of Amazon's services, like Amazon Prime with Prime Video, and I've used Amazon Music, which Spotify is better than Amazon Music, but Audible, Prime Shipping, Kindle. I read some ebooks here and there. Uh, you know, I've as troublesome as it may seem, as like a big empire of content, I felt like it was the place for me to go to publish my book. And if you can make your own ebook, hardcover, and softcover all in one place, that's really valuable. I'll hopefully make an ebook, an audiobook of my own book in the future as well. I do have access to a studio, but that will probably not go, onto Audible because that would mean um, that would require some channels that I do not have access to and don't have the money to gain access to if I did. So suffice it to say that um, as a fantasy author, I'm trying to um, be as successful and independent author as I can be. That is difficult, but it's a long process, and I'm working through it. Part of that is me coming here onto Twitch, reading Nate Reads the Classics books, and hopefully drawing some people in. You can also visit my blog, which is at phyronianchronicle.com. That's PHRON. I'm misspelling my own words. PHRONIANCHRONICLE.com. You can just go to the blog tab on the top of the page and you can read my blog. You can donate on a lot of my blog posts. There's a one-time donation, a recurring donation option. Just if you want to help keep my blog running, it's totally free to access. So it's up to you if you want to donate. And there's links all over the place for buying my book. And the more visitors I get there, the more views I get on these videos, the more effort I will be willing to put into making more of these videos, making more blog posts. So, yeah, here I go trying to take a break from reading out loud, and I just talk and talk and talk. If this next chapter is anywhere near as long as the last one, I'm probably going to quit after this chapter 11 here, because that was impressively long, and I would rather not go too early into the morning. I have a couple other things I want to do. But welcome if you're staying up past 1:30 in the morning to, or if you just can't sleep and you need someone to listen to. Hopefully my voice is soothing enough or dull enough, which is more what I think it is, to ease you off to sleep. But anyway, this is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I'm continuing at chapter 11, All by Electricity. I'll take one more sip of water before I do. Chapter 11, All by Electricity. Sir, said Captain Nemo, showing me the instruments hanging on the walls of his room, here are the contrivances required for the navigation of the Nautilus. Here, as in the drawing room, I have them always under my eyes, and they indicate my position and exact direction in the middle of the ocean. Some are known to you, such as the thermometer, which gives the internal temperature of the Nautilus, the barometer, which indicates the weight of the air and foretells the changes of the weather, the hygrometer, which marks the dryness of the atmosphere, the storm glass, the contents of which, by decomposing, announce the approach of tempests, the compass, which guides my course, the sextant, which shows the latitude by the altitude of the sun, chronometers, by which I calculate the longitude, and glasses for day and night, which I use to examine the points of the horizon. Then the Nautilus rises to the shore, to the surface of the waves. These are the usual nautical instruments, I replied, and I know the use of them, but these others I do not. But these others, no doubt, answer to the particular requirements of the Nautilus. This dial with movable needle is a manometer, is it not? It is actually a manometer. but by communication with the water, whose external pressure it indicates, it gives our depth at the same time. And these other instruments, the use of which I cannot guess? Here, Professor, I ought to give you some explanations. Will you be kind enough to listen to me? He was silent for a few moments, then he said, There is a powerful agent, obedient, rapid, easy, which conforms to every use, and reigns supreme on board my vessel. Everything is done by means of it. It lights, warms it, and the soul of my mechanical apparatus. This agent is electricity. Electricity? I cried in surprise. Yes, sir. Nevertheless, Captain, you possess an extreme rapidity of movement which does not agree with the power of electricity. Until now, its dynamic force has remained rather under restraint and has only been able to produce a small amount of power. Elon Musk would like a word. Professor, said Captain Nemo, my electricity is not everybody's. You know what seawater is composed of. In 1,000 grams are found 96.5% of water and about 2 2/3% of chloride of sodium. Then in a smaller quantity, chlorides of magnesium and of potassium, bromide of magnesium, sulfate of magnesia, sulfate of carbonate of lime, and carbonate of lime. You see then that chloride of sodium forms a large part of it. So it is this sodium that I extract from the seawater, and of which I compose my ingredients. I owe all to the ocean. It produces electricity, and electricity gives heat, light, motion, and in a word, life to the Nautilus. But not the air you breathe? Oh, I could manufacture the air necessary for my consumption, but it is useless, because I go up to the surface of the water when I please. However, if electricity does not furnish me with air to breathe, it works at least the powerful pumps which are stored in spacious reservoirs, and which enable me to prolong at need. And as long as I will, my stay in the depths of the sea. It gives a uniform and unintermittent light, which the sun does not. Now look at this clock. It is electrical, and goes with a regularity that defies the best chronometers. I have divided it into 24 hours, like the Italian clocks, because for me there is neither night nor day, sun nor moon, but only that factitious light that I take with me to the bottom of the sea. Look, just now it is 10 o'clock in the morning. Exactly. Another application of electricity. This dial hanging in front of us indicates the speed of the Nautilus. An electric thread pulls it in communication with the screw, and the needle indicates the real speed. Look, now we are spinning along with a uniform speed of 15 miles an hour. It is marvelous, and I see, Captain, you are right to make use of this agent that takes the place of wind, water, and steam. We have not finished, Mr. Aronnax, said Captain Nemo, rising. If you will allow me, we will examine the stern of the Nautilus. Really, I knew already the anterior part of the submarine boat, of which this is the exact division, starting from the ship's head, the dining room, 5 yards long, separated from the library by a watertight partition, the library 5 yards long, the large drawing room 10 yards long, separated from the captain's room by a second watertight partition, the said room 5 yards in length, mine 2.5 yards, and lastly a reservoir of air 7.5 yards that extended to the bows. Total length 35 yards, or 105 feet. The partitions had doors that were shut hermetically by means of India rubber instruments, and they ensured the safety of the Nautilus in case of a leak. I followed Captain Nemo through the waist and arrived at the center of the boat. There was a sort of well that opened between two partitions. An iron ladder, fastened with an iron hook to the partition, led to the upper end. I asked the captain what the ladder was used for. It leads to a small boat, he said. What? You have a boat? I exclaimed in response. Of course, an excellent vessel, light and insubmersible, that serves either as a fishing or as a pleasure boat. But then, when you wish to embark, you are obligated to come to the surface of the water? Not at all. This boat is attached to the upper part of the hull of the Nautilus, and occupies a cavity made for it. It is decked quite watertight and held together by solid bolts. This ladder leads to a manhole made in the hull of the Nautilus, which corresponds with a similar hole made in the side of the boat. By this double opening, I get into the small vessel. They shut the one belonging to the Nautilus. I shut the other by means of screw pressure. I undo the bolts, and the little boat goes up to the surface of the sea with prodigious rapidity. I then open the panel of the bridge, carefully shut till then. I mast it, hoist my sail, take my oars, and I'm off. But how do you get back on board? I do not come back, Mr. Aronnax. The Nautilus comes to me. By your orders? By my orders. An electric thread connects us. I telegraph to it, and that is enough. Really, I said, astonished at these marvels. Nothing can be more simple. After having passed by the cage of the staircase that led to the platform, I saw a cabin 6 feet long, in which Conseil and Ned Land, enchanted with their repast, were devouring it with avidity. Then a door opened into a kitchen 9 feet long, situated beneath the large storerooms. Their electricity, better than gas itself, did all the cooking. The streams under the furnaces gave out to the sponges of plantina a heat which was regularly kept up and distributed. They also heated a distilling apparatus which, by evaporation, furnished excellent drinkable water. Near this kitchen was a bathroom comfortably furnished, with hot and cold water taps. Next to the kitchen was the berth room of the vessel, 16 feet long, but the door was shut, and I could not see the management of it, which might have given me an idea of the number of men employed on board the Nautilus. At the bottom was a fourth partition that separated in this office from the engine room. A door opened, and I found myself in the compartment where Captain Nemo, certainly an engineer of a very high order, had arranged his locomotive machinery. This engine room, clearly lighted, did not measure less than 65 feet in length. It was doubled into two parts. The first contained the materials for producing electricity, and the second the machinery that connected it with the screw. I examined it with great interest, in order to understand the machinery of the Nautilus. You see, said the captain, I use Bunsen's contrivances, not Ruhmkorff's. Those would not have been powerful enough. Bunsen's are fewer in number, but strong and large, which experience proves to be the best. The electricity produced passes forward, where it works, by electromagnets of great size, by a system of levers and cog wheels which transmit the movement to the axle of the screw. This one, the diameter of which is 19 feet, and the thread 23 feet, performs about 120 revolutions in a second. And you get then a speed of 50 miles an hour. I have seen the Nautilus maneuver before the Abraham Lincoln, and I have my own ideas as to its speed, but this is not enough. We must see where we go. We must be able to direct it to the right, to the left, above, below. How do you get to the great depths, where you find an increasing resistance, which is rated by hundreds of atmospheres? Train. How do you return to the surface of the ocean, and how do you maintain yourselves in a requisite medium? Am I asking too much? Not at all, Professor, replied the captain with some hesitation. Since you may never leave this submarine boat, come into the saloon. It is our usual study, and there you will learn all you want to know about the Nautilus. That was a much more manageable chapter. Didn't even need to take a drink in the middle of it, I don't think. I'm going to take a quick look and see how long this next chapter is. It's pretty short. I can read that one too. But, as usual, in my interlude, thanks for watching Nate Reads the Classics. I read classic literature like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne and The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which is the only other one I've done here on Twitch so far. I do this both out of a passion for reading classic literature and helping other people kind of access it easier than, sometimes people have difficulty sitting down and reading these days, and it might just be easier to listen. That's why audiobooks are so popular. That's why Audible is so successful. But I myself am a fantasy author, and I wrote this book, Withered Kingdom. It's a fantasy novel, excuse me, about an angel who had a previous life that he has forgotten entirely about, and he finds himself on a new planet without his memories, but a talent for wind magic and friendship with a half giant man that also has his own magical powers. But they are in a world that is locked up by a magical war, and sort of a angels versus demons sort of conflict begins to ensue as the main character discovers that he's not just fighting against any earthly or worldly ills, but against a much greater darkness that only someone with the might of an angel can counter. So his friendship with this half giant helps him to connect with people who help him unlock memories of his past life in order to understand his destiny as an angel and the duties and the potential that he can fulfill. Withered Kingdom is the first of a series that I call The Rebirth of Gia, Gia being the name of the main character. The second book, The Third Vessel, is hopefully going to come out around this fall, maybe by the holiday season. I'm not sure. Um, it's a project I've been working on for a very long time. I have most of the sequel already finished. I do need to do some cover art, which I don't do myself. I buy cover art from other people. I commission artists, but I do a lot of the design myself. That's why it definitely looks self-published, because it is. Um, that's about the best I can do. It is not meant to look very colorful or very vivacious, because the story itself is a bit of a darker one, and the main character as an angel does have a role in inspiring new um, new sense of hope in a people that have been subject to a generational war. So it's therefore called Withered Kingdom. This is the world that he finds himself in. So it is available now, my book, Withered Kingdom, on Amazon in three formats, those being softcover or paperback, same thing, hardcover, which is brand new. I just added that, and I'm very excited to see the first copies arrive very soon. And three, see my hand? I don't know. I'm not very good with cameras, but three, the Kindle ebook, which was actually the first version. So I kind of jumped all around. But yes, the Kindle ebook, which is $5 on the Kindle page right now, or on the Kindle app, or you can buy it through Amazon. And on Amazon, the regular store, you can buy the paperback for about $12 US dollars and $25 for the hardcover. The hardcover is more expensive because it is a hardcover. That seems like a bit of a gap between 12 to 25, but if you really want a hardcover book, you'll pay for it. It is case laminate, not dust jacketed, so it looks more like. Gosh, I wish I had a copy with me right now. It looks like if you're a Zelda fan, Hyrule Historia does not have a dust jacket. Most of the regular Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition source books, or the standard books published by Wizards of the Coast, are case laminate. They don't have a dust jacket on them that you can remove. They're just printed directly on the surface or on a sheet that is wrapped around and glued to the board, excuse me, that makes up the binding of the book. Wow, I'm having trouble. Hold on. So yeah, I am a fantasy author. I am self-published. I have self-published before, back in 2009, but I didn't have a lot of time to sell my book, and I have since afterward lived a whole lot of life, and gone to college, got a bachelor's degree in English, emphasizing in creative writing, and I have read a whole lot more, and I feel like the writer I was then is not the same as the writer I am now. So that book that I wrote before, even though it is still available, it's called The Tragedy of Gia. It is still available on Amazon, but it is not printed on demand like Withered Kingdom is. If you want to buy a copy of Withered Kingdom, you can go on there right now. You can buy the hardcover or the soft cover. It'll say one new in each, but what they really mean is they will print it and send it to you right away. So it might take a little longer than a day, or the 1 to 2 day prime shipping. So far, I've been waiting a lot longer than usual for my first hardcovers to arrive, but when they arrive, I'll be able to sign those and send them out to people. If you are interested in any of these things, either go right ahead to Amazon, or if you want to get to know more about me and my books, you can visit phronianchronicle.com, which is spelled P-H, hold on, PHYRONIANCHRONICLE.com, which is the home of my blog. You can read me talking about reading and writing and popular culture, video games, uh, other things that I enjoy randomly. I don't have a whole lot of direction to that blog. It's just kind of me having an outlet online and being able to say whatever I want. And, um, that's just kind of what happens when people have the internet at their fingertips. So there's that. I have multiple social media accounts like Twitter, YouTube. I have a Facebook page, Nathan T. Orgel Author. And I have I don't know. That's most of it, though. I have my LinkedIn page, which is just Nathan Orgel, maybe. I know there's another Nathan Orgel out there who is a professor somewhere. He's got to be older than me. But anyway, tangent over. I'm going to resume at chapter 12, Some Figures, from Jules Verne's classic 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. All right. A moment after we were seated on a divan in the saloon smoking, A moment after, we were seated on a divan in the saloon, smoking. The captain showed me a sketch that gave the plan, section, and elevation of the Nautilus. Then he began his description in these words. Here, Mr. Aronnax, are the several dimensions of the boat you are in. It is an elongated cylinder with conical ends. It is very like a cigar in shape, a shape already adopted in London in several constructions of the same sort. The length of the cylinder from stem to stern is exactly 232 feet, and its maximum breadth is 26 feet. It is not built quite like our long voyage steamers, but its lines are sufficiently long, and its curves prolonged enough, to allow the water to slide off easily and oppose no obstacle to its passage. These two dimensions enable you to obtain by a simple calculation the surface and cubic continents of the Nautilus. Its area measures 6,032 feet, and its contents about 1,500 cubic yards. That is to say, when completely immersed, it displaces 50,000 feet of water, or weighs 1,500 tons. When I made the plans for this submarine vessel, I meant that 9/10 should be submerged. Consequently, it ought only to displace 9/10 of its bulk, that is to say, only to weigh that number of tons. I ought not, therefore, to have exceeded that weight, constructing it on the aforesaid dimensions. The Nautilus is composed of two hulls, one inside, the other outside, joined by T-shaped irons, which render it very strong. Indeed, owing to the cellular arrangement, it resists like a block, as if it were solid. Its sides cannot yield. It coheres spontaneously. I don't know why I had difficulty reading the word spontaneously. I know that one. It coheres spontaneously and not by the closeness of its rivets, and its perfect union of the materials enables it to defy the roughest seas. These two hulls are composed of steel plates, whose density is from zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8 of that of water. The first is not less than 2 inches and a half thick and weighs 394 tons. The second envelope, the keel, 20 inches high and 10 thick, weighs only 62 tons. The engine, the ballast, and the several accessories and apparatus appendages, the partitions and bulkheads, weigh 961.62 tons. Do you follow all this? I do. I don't, but he does. Then, when the Nautilus is afloat under these circumstances, 1/10 is out of the water. Now, if I have made reservoirs of a size equal to this tenth, or capable of holding 150 tons, then I fill them with water. The boat weighing then 1,507 tons will be completely immersed. That would happen, Professor. These reservoirs are in the lower part of the Nautilus. I turn on taps and they fill, and the vessel sinks. That had just been level with the surface. Well, Captain, but now we come to the real difficulty. I can understand your rising to the surface, but diving below the surface, does not your submarine contrivance encounter a pressure, and consequently undergo an upward thrust of 1 atmosphere for every 30 feet of water, just about 15 pounds per square inch? Just so, sir. Then, unless you quite fill the Nautilus, I do not see how you can draw it down to those depths. Professor, you must not confound statics with dynamics, or you will be exposed to grave errors. There is very little labor spent in attaining the lower regions of the ocean, for all bodies have a tendency to sink. When I wanted to find out the necessary increase of weight required to sink the Nautilus, I had only to calculate the reduction of volume that sea water requires, according to the depth. That is evident. Now, if water is not absolutely incompressible, as it is at least capable of very slight compression, indeed, after the most recent calculations, this reduction is only 0.000436 of an atmosphere for each 30 feet of depth. If we want to sink 3,000 feet, I should keep account of the reduction of bulk under a pressure equal to that of a column of water of 1,000 feet. The calculation is easily verified. Now I have supplementary reservoirs capable of holding 100 tons. Therefore I can sink to a considerable depth, when I wish to rise to the level of the sea. I only let off the water and empty all the reservoirs if I want the Nautilus to emerge from the 10th part of her total capacity. I had nothing to object to these reasonings. I admit your calculations, Captain, I replied. I should be wrong to dispute them, since daily experience confirms them, but I foresee a real difficulty in that way. What, sir? When you are about 1,000 feet deep, the walls of the Nautilus bear a pressure of 100 atmospheres. If, then, just now you were to empty the supplementary reservoirs, to lighten the vessel and go up to the surface, the pumps must overcome the pressure of 100 atmospheres, which is 1,500 pounds per square inch. From that power, that electricity alone can give, said the captain hastily. I repeat, sir, that the dynamic power of my engines is almost infinite. The pumps of the Nautilus have an enormous power, as you must have observed when their jets of water burst like a torrent upon the Abraham Lincoln. Besides, I use subsidiary reservoirs only to attain a mean depth of 750 to 1,000 fathoms, and that with a view of managing my machines. Also, when I have a mind to visit the depths of the ocean 5 or 6 miles below the surface, I make use of slower but not less infallible means. What are they, Captain? That involves my telling you how the Nautilus is worked. I am impatient to learn. To steer this boat to starboard or port, to turn, in a word, following a horizontal plan, I use an ordinary rudder fixed on the back of the stern post, and with one wheel and some tackle to steer by. But I can also make the Nautilus rise and sink and rise, by a vertical movement by means of two inclined planes fastened to its sides, opposite the center of flotation, planes that move in every direction that are worked by powerful levers from the interior. If the planes are kept parallel with the boat, it moves horizontally. If slanted, the Nautilus, according to this inclination, and under the influence of the screw, either sinks diagonally or rises diagonally as it suits me. And even if I wish to rise more quickly to the surface, I ship the crew, and the pressure of the water causes the Nautilus to rise vertically, like a balloon filled with hydrogen. Bravo, Captain, but how can the steersman follow the route in the middle of the waters? The steersman is placed in a glazed box that is raised about the hull of the Nautilus and furnished with lenses. Are these lenses capable of resisting such pressure? Perfectly. Glass, which breaks at a blow, is nevertheless, capable of offering considerable resistance. During some experiments of finishing the electric light in 1864 in the northern seas, we saw plates less than a third of an inch thick resist a pressure of 16 atmospheres. Now the glass that I use is not less than 30 times thicker. Excuse me. Granted, but after all, in order to see, the light must exceed the darkness, and in the midst of the darkness in the water, how can you see? Behind the steersman's cage is placed a powerful electric reflector, and rays which light up the sea for half a mile in front. Ah, bravo, bravo, Captain. Now I can account for the phosphorescence in the supposed narwhal that puzzled us so. I now ask you if the boarding of the Nautilus and that of the Scotia that has made such a noise has been the result of a chance rencontre? Quite accidental, sir. I was sailing only 1 fathom below the surface of the water when the shock came. It had no bad result. None, sir. But now, about your rencontre with the Abraham Lincoln. Professor, I am sorry for one of the best vessels in the American Navy, but they attacked me, and I was bound to defend myself. I contented myself, however, with putting the frigate hors de combat, which she will not have any difficulty in getting repaired at the next port. Ah, Commander, your Nautilus is certainly a marvelous boat. Yes, Professor, and I love it as if it were part of myself. If danger threatens one of your vessels on the ocean, the first impression is the feeling of an abyss above and below. On the Nautilus, men's hearts never fail them. No defects to be afraid of, for the double shell is as firm as iron, no rigging to attend to, no sails for the wind to carry away, no boilers to burst, no fire to fear, for the vessel is made of iron, not of wood, no coal to run short, for electricity is the only mechanical agent, no collision to fear, for it alone swims in deep water, no tempest to brave, for when it dives below the water it reaches absolute tranquillity. There, sir, that is the perfection of vessels, and if it is true that the engineer has more confidence in the vessel than the builder, and the builder than the captain himself, you understand the trust I repose in my Nautilus, for I am at once captain, builder, and engineer. But how could you construct this wonderful Nautilus in secret? Each separate portion Mr. Aronnax has brought from different parts of the globe. But these parts had to be put together and arranged? Professor, I had set up my workshops upon a desert island in the ocean. There my workmen, that is to say the brave men I instructed and educated, and myself have put together our Nautilus. Then when the work was finished, fire destroyed all trace of our proceedings on this island that I could have jumped over if I had liked. Then the cost of the vessel is great? Mr. Aronnax, an iron vessel costs L 145 per ton. Now the Nautilus weighed 1,500. It therefore came to L 67,500 and L 80,000 more for fitting it up, and about L 200,000 for the works of art and the collections it contains. One last question, Captain Nemo. Ask it, Professor. Are you rich? Immensely rich, sir, and if I could, without missing it, pay the national debt of France. I stayed at the singular person who spoke thus. Was he playing upon my credulity? the future would decide that. So there we go. This has been another another episode, another stream of Nate Reads the Classics. I have been reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, chapters 10, 11, and 12. There's probably about two-thirds, little more than two-thirds left of the book, because we're about to start chapter 13. I'm done reading for today, but next time I stream, I'll read chapter 13 and on. My name is Nathan Orgel. I am a fantasy writer, a fantasy author. This is my book, Withered Kingdom, which I recently published. It is about an angel who has forgotten his past, an entire past life, and finds himself on a war-torn land called Firon, where he discovers he has magical powers, and he befriends a half-giant who helps him learn how to connect with people from his past life and understand where he comes from and the destiny that is ahead of him. This is the beginning of a series that will be very long. The next book will be thicker than the one I just showed you by at least a quarter of the width there. You can buy my book right now, Withered Kingdom. You can buy it on Amazon by searching simply Withered Kingdom or my name. And you can buy it in 3 different formats. Those 3 formats are Kindle ebook, paperback, and hardcover. The hardcover is the newest one. It has the most updated version of the text. Since I am self-published, a lot of the editing was just me reading it to other people and looking for errors and reading it on Facebook live streams of my own in the past. So most of the most recent version to buy is the hardcover. Hardcover is the most expensive, but it's a hardcover, so that's natural. And hardcovers last longer. From the research that I have done, the hardcovers, which are case laminate, not dust jacketed, that Amazon produces are of a pretty high quality. They use sewn stitching or stitched binding for the pages instead of just glue, so they hold together pretty well over time. And I'm excited to finally get the first couple books in my hands, and that might even be tomorrow, if at soonest, maybe in a couple more days. I've been waiting for a while for them because these are the first printings of the book. But when they do arrive, I will make a video of that. I don't know if it'll be here on Twitch, but that's something I will do. Anyway, thanks for joining me. If you've been viewing today, I really appreciate it. If you are viewing later on my YouTube channel or embedded into my blog or whatever you do, video on demand, I really appreciate the visit. And please consider either donating on my blog. Most of my recent blog posts have a little donation block, either a one-time donation or a recurring donation. You can customize things however you want. You can just use a credit card or a debit card to make that donation. That helps support me in writing my books, in publishing, in blogging, in doing Nate Reads the Classics, everything that I do on all my social media outlets. Every little bit helps, even if it's just a couple dollars for right now. It would make a huge difference and would help inspire me to know where to put the work in and find out what is the best way to sell a book, because it's 2022. There is more content out there than I could possibly imagine. I just know that there's a ton. People are self-publishing their books all the time, and I'm trying to set myself apart. So that's part of the reason I come here on to Nate Reads the Classics, and I read classic literature, everything from the public domain. What you are seeing right now here, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the... No, it doesn't look like you can. But I'm reading from Gutenberg.org, which hosts everything for free, because the book was written well over 100 years ago, meaning that it is in the public domain. So there's no copyright issue here. That's referring to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, not to my book. My book has only been out a couple of years. But if you like me reading this, please follow and like and subscribe. Visit my blog at phyronianchronicle.com, PHYRONIANCHRONICLE.com. Anything you can do, any interaction you can give me, likes, follows, shares, everything helps other people find my book as well. And I need as much publicity as I can. So thanks for everything you can do. That's the end for me right now. This has been Nate Reads the Classics, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, Part 3. I'll return hopefully in a couple days, maybe even tomorrow.